Hey, good morning, all. Mr. Mosca here on this Tuesday. So this little lecture might be a little bit longer than some we've had in the past, but there aren't any questions you have to do along with it. So hopefully you'll bear with me for however long that it takes. I want to make sure that you have a clear understanding about the Mexican-American War and some of the stuff we've been talking about before the test on Thursday. Speaking of, hey, there I am. That's one of the things I've been doing. A lot of yard work, and then my kids like to help, so I thought that was kind of a cute picture. But anyway, so we'll review the quiz today that you took last Friday. I also have included with today's dealings the vocabulary list for the unit, just like ones that we've had before in here. Tomorrow will just be a review day. The test will be on Thursday. I'll give you a couple of days to get it done. Again, it's one of those things where it's a little bit different, where you do have open resources. I only ask that you not confer with your other students on it, but I'm going to try to ask questions that you just can't necessarily Google. But, even if you can, at least you're making the effort to look those things up and get the right answers marked. And then we'll continue on with lesson 8. I will be using a little bit more of the some of the tools associated with Screencastify. So bear with me if I struggle with any of that. But I do want to talk about the quiz. There it is. Overall, pretty good. Number 1, Mexico, obviously. Some people put Sam Houston for this one, number 5, but it was Stephen Austin or Stephen F. Austin. Number 2 was the one that I would say was most commonly incorrect. As a result of the Texas Revolution, what happened? It's B. Texas became an independent country. Texas did become a state, but that wasn't until I believe 9 years later. And then at 42nd, I just sort of made up. That was in, as you can see right here, I did try to stress it at the very end of the timeline here. It says Texas becomes its own independent country. It's not a state yet. So just so you know, I wasn't lying to you there. The old 300, the 297 families, 1830s. Perspective. Come on, how many times did I mention perspective? So that was the correct answer there. The Monroe Doctrine, if you're a little fuzzy on that, well, here's basically a definition for you because that will appear on the test. Cotton farming for 8, a lot of people put that. Now, yes, it has to do with cotton farming and cotton cultivation was mentioned, but it's the ban on slavery. The people in Mexico aren't going to ban the growing of cotton. They're going to ban slavery. So you're free to grow cotton, just not while imprisoning people while doing so. So anyway, vocabulary, that's the next thing I mentioned, and that will be included with what's given you today. The list isn't terribly long. It basically kind of goes in order with the relations with France first, and then it mentions some of the key words and phrases from the War of 1812, and then finally things from the Texas Revolution and Mexican-American War. As you review some of these things, try to differentiate between, is it something that had to do with the Texas Revolution or something that had to do with the Mexican-American War, because sometimes that can be a little bit tricky. But anyway, let's move back to our lesson 8 here. So kind of reflecting back to Manifest Destiny, this is a map that you saw earlier on in the unit. Well, how's it going? I guess pretty well, right? So we've got this major part here. I pull up my pointer. Louisiana, well, that's not Louisiana. That's not ruled by the French anymore. That is now controlled by the United States as of 1803. We're also going to talk about how this section up here, which was, now we know that this is Canada and this is Washington and Oregon and whatnot. But basically a dividing line was made. So this part ends up being the United States, called the Oregon Territory, but later becomes several states. But then this is the idea of New Spain, which then becomes Mexico. And so it's going well, but still more needs to be added. Let me get rid of that. So a little reading here about James K. Polk, not necessarily one of our most famous presidents, number 11, but he was, as it says right here, kind of giving you an answer here, it says, was committed to national expansion. So even though he was not exactly a Thomas Jefferson and Abraham Lincoln as far as our history textbooks go, he was really the perfect president to finish Manifest Destiny, because it seems like this was something he was really had strong feelings about. He was from Tennessee. He was pro-slavery, so all those things about expansion he favored. The Oregon Territory, that's talked about here. You can read that on your own, but basically that sets up why there is the border, and that border really still exists all the way over to Minnesota. Troubles with Mexico, part 1 of 2. This is straight from your textbook, as was the other reading. So please go through that. Originally, it wasn't necessarily by force, as you can see right here. It says Polk offered to buy Texas from California and New Mexico for a fee. Now, the biggest paragraph to pay attention to is this one in the middle, because there is a border dispute. Okay, to make matters worse, Texas and Mexico could not agree on the official border between them. Texas claimed the Rio Grande, a river south of San Antonio, as its southern boundary. Mexico insisted on the Nueces River as the border of Texas. Many thousands of square miles of territory was at stake. So, what does that exactly look like? Well, let me try to use the oops. Like I said, it's going to take me a little bit here. Because I actually want to use the pen for this. So, the river that they're talking about, so you can see the Rio Grande there. The other river, this Nueces, is pretty much like that. Now, again, that might not seem like a lot of land, but Texas is a big state, so you're talking about many, many hundreds and thousands of square miles. So there's agreement everywhere that this is Mexico, and there's agreement everywhere that, of course, this up here is the United States. Pardon my first grade writing skills here. Okay, but what's in question is this land right in between. Okay, so this land between the two. So what happens is, as I switch my color here, let's go to the United States in a nice purple, I guess. James K. Polk sends Zachary Taylor, who you'll hear about in the reading. He was a general and later becomes the president as well. He sends a bunch of troops to the northern bank of the Rio Grande River. Okay, so this is where it kind of ties in the idea of perspective, because from the American point of view, these soldiers, highlighted in the purple dots, though they are in American territory. But from the Mexican point of view, these soldiers not only are they not in American territory, they are hundreds of miles within Mexican territory. Okay, so this is seen as an act of war, and the Mexican military decides to put soldiers right on this bank right here. All right. And then, the river is wide, but it's not that wide. So after a while, I believe it was in April, a Mexican cavalry crosses the border, and there ends up being a skirmish, and 16 American soldiers are either killed or injured. And this is seen as American blood is being shed on American soil, and Congress declares war on Mexico. Now, this is, again, looking at the idea of perspective. Was American blood shed on American soil? From the Mexican perspective, this would be seen as an invasion, having American troops this far into Mexico. But from the American point of view, it's the exact opposite. It's Mexican military coming into the United States and killing or injuring American soldiers. So again, that's really highlights why perspective matters, and why this border, the Nueces up here, and the Rio Grande, had that been established, then maybe this all could have been prevented. But it wasn't. Let's put that away. I said away. Oh boy. There. Solved it. Troubles with Mexico. So this essentially explains what I was talking about there, with what exactly happened there and Congress declaring war. Some people, including Abraham Lincoln, mentioned here, were very skeptical about the reasons why America was sort of in favor of this, going to war over something that was seen as so small. And many in the North thought this was just basically an excuse to expand slavery, because as the land in the if the land in the South expanded, then so too would slavery. And that has to do with something called the Missouri Compromise. So I know it's getting kind of a lot here, but that's why I wanted watch this if necessary. The Missouri Compromise of 1820 basically split the country in half in terms of the views on slavery. So you can see here that the states that are marked in pink actually had slavery, and the states that are green are free to slavery. So there's our own New Hampshire up there. But what the Missouri Compromise did was it made this line right here. And it said if you fall below this line, south of this line, you can have slavery. If you're north of this line, you cannot have slavery. So we're going to talk about the Missouri Compromise later because it was, we talked about compromises before and how sometimes they can be, they sound like a good idea, right? Agreeing on who rides shotgun or toppings of a pizza. But sometimes when you're dealing with, life and limb and liberty and things like that, then maybe compromises aren't the best. Anyway, the Missouri Compromise gave the United States two different rules of law. But as you can see, the land south of this line doesn't really extend very far, right? Because soon enough, you run into land that is ruled by Spain or then later on ruled by Mexico. So while there's all kinds of room to expand into the north, that land won't be open to slavery. So some people, like Abraham Lincoln and many others, thought that, well, if America is able to take this land from Spain and then later from Mexico, well, if this line, as it continues, I'm going to do my best to sort of follow it, right? As that line continues all the way to the Pacific, well, look what happens to the land available for slavery, right? That increases as well, especially into Texas. And we talked about cotton cultivation and things like that. All right. So the people were very, very fearful of the expansion of slavery and saw this as a way to extend the American property south of that line that was drawn by the Missouri Compromise back in 1820. Keep in mind, the Mexican-American War is in the 1840s. Instead of a long reading here, I just broke it down into a timeline. As you can see, the war is relatively short. Some Americans thought it was actually going to be shorter. The conflict in the Rio Grande that I was talking about happens in 1846. Then we have Zachary Taylor leading his troops in there. Well, I'll let you read this on your own. One thing to note is that the name Santa Anna, which popped up in the Texas Revolution, it's the very same Santa Anna. He actually had quite an interesting life. I was reading about him last night, but I won't talk about too much of that. One thing to focus on is what exactly America gained. So make sure you review February in 1848. America did, after the war, end up paying Mexico for the land that was taken in this Mexican cession, but at 5 cents per acre, it was, you could say, a bargain. And then some of the key people to know, and these people are mentioned on your vocabulary list. James Polk is here. Zachary Taylor. We know him more as a general as opposed to a president. He was only president for about a year and a half. He actually passed away in office. He was out celebrating the start of the Washington Monument and went into gastrointestinal distress and never recovered from that. One of my favorite characters from history, this guy right here, Winfield Scott. One of his nicknames was Old Fuss and Feathers, and this guy was a soldier and a general for decades. He actually ended up running for president, although he lost. And then Santa Anna is here. So not only did he lose the Texas Revolution, he also lost the Mexican-American War as well. There's several reasons why Mexico lost the Mexican-American War. And maybe if we were actually in class, I'd go over some of them, but I'm just going to try to stick to the main ideas here. One interesting note about Santa Anna is that he's often given credit for helping to bring chewing gum to the United States. So that's sort of a weird footnote in history. All right. Hopefully I didn't rush through that too much. The reading is here for you. Hopefully my map helped with regard to the border dispute. I'm sure if you Google some of these things as well, if anything's unclear, you can also, of course, email me. And tomorrow I will have something for you to review some of those vocabulary terms and some of the main ideas. And then we'll have the test on Thursday. I envision probably a lot of multiple choice, probably some short answers, maybe some matching, and then trying to get a couple, maybe longer responses that get you to at the idea of perspective from lesson 6. All right, I guess that is all. So I will end it here. Have a good day, everyone.